I'd like to ask you, please, if you have the opportunity to invite other people to join us, that would be terrific. Please accept that as a formal personal request. Now, in the category of good news, from the House of Representatives, good news. How is that? Okay. The House Appropriations Committee has proposed $2.5 million in funding.
Billion.
2.5 million in funding to support the work of Deborah Lipstadt, who is the special envoy dealing with anti-Semitism. The last year's funding was 1.5 million, and the House is recommending upping it to 2.5 million. I'll accept that as good news. Okay, we can accept that as good news, and that's fine. Now, another piece of good news. The Anglican Church of Canada has voted to remove from its prayer book a prayer calling for the conversion of the Jews. When I read that, I said, like, what am I, back in the Middle Ages? Why is that still there? But they don't answer why it is still there. But the church has decided that it will not single out Jews as targets for conversion. So hooray for the Anglican Church in Canada. And to be fair and clear, the church at the same time is trying to put together a statement acknowledging and repenting for its participation in anti-Semitism. So, are we okay with that? So we have friends in the Anglican Church in Canada. Now, Natan Sharansky was interviewed this week, and the interviewer asked the question, as a child of Holocaust survivors, speaking for a lot of other people, this is the interviewer's question. Children of Holocaust survivors and a lot of other Jewish people cannot, and I'm using their language, dredge up much sympathy for the Ukrainians and how they were chewing gum as they shot us in the mass graves at Baba Yar. I have to, in the pursuit of full disclosure, my personal initial response to going all full blast in defense of Ukraine was limited by my knowledge of how the Ukrainians have been actively anti-Semitic over the past centuries, actively, murderously anti-Semitic. But I swallowed my comments because, you know me, I just want to be liked. And I don't want anyone not to like me. And to say that we shouldn't support the Ukrainians against Russia seems petty. You know, just because Jews were machine gunned by Ukrainians at Baba Yar, why should I hold that against them? And Bogdan Khmelnytsky and the whole pogrom business and the history of Ukraine. It's a big deal. And so I kept my mouth shut. Sharansky was asked this question in the interview. He said, there are so many people who died in the Holocaust who were members of my family. And he said, I am chairman of the Baba Yar Memorial Commission. Okay. I deal all the time with victims. And these victims cannot make themselves feel solidarity with Ukraine as a state or Ukrainians as a nation, knowing what a terrible history there was. The Khmelnytsky pogroms, the Holocaust, and so forth. So I'm glad that you asked me this question. Now, before I share with you Sharansky's response, Steve Miller? Steve Miller, you were kicked off the jury? Okay. We'll get to Steve in a minute. I would like to give everyone here a chance to weigh in on how you feel about that reality. Many survivors have no sympathy for the Ukrainians or Ukraine, and many survivors would not like to support a full-scale defense of Ukraine. So I see, first of all, I see Howard, I see Sukasa, and Michael. We'll go in that order. Howard, Sukasa, Michael.
I could share a firsthand experience with my step-grandfather, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, and he described after the war, walking or traveling back to his town, to see what happened to his nice big home that he owned, and it was of course occupied by Ukrainians. And when he made himself known there, they went like this to him and told him to get out of town before dark. So that's, for whatever that's worth, which probably
no, it's worth. Thank you, Sukasa.
I went on the March of the Living in April, and we visited the Krakow JCC, which, as an aside, is what they have done there is remarkable. They have a preschool and teach Hebrew and on and on and on, but they are also supporting the Ukrainian refugees that are coming in. And I don't know if they decide if they have to be Jewish to be supported by the Krakow JCC. And so I mentioned that this happened years ago, this anti-Semitism. And I look at Germany, and if we hold on to that, can we ever advance? Can we ever make progress? Can we ever get past it? So I just offer those two things.
Super, we're doing great by keeping the responses short and to the point. Michael.
Yeah, I agree with that last comment and would build on it a little bit as well. To say that, obviously I do not begrudge the feelings of any Holocaust survivors, however they want to feel about it. They went through it. They get to feel however they want. But for myself, I agree that, if there's any actual people left who committed the crimes during the Holocaust, I don't have any particular sympathy for them. But there's a whole Ukrainian population that are descendants and don't have the blame for what happened at the time. Are there anti-Semites in there? Probably. But if we went around not having sympathy for any country that had anti-Semites in it, we'd be pretty unsympathetic toward the world at large. So yeah, that's my view.
Thank you, Harvey.
Okay. I see it as a choice between two governments now. And let me give you some history first. My great grandparents came here from Ukraine, one of my great grandparents, and they left because of pogroms. So that was around 1910. So over 100 years ago. A lot has changed. I mean, Ukraine, I think, was fairly terrible until fairly recently. Now you have a choice of Ukraine headed by a person who has Jewish roots, his vice president has Jewish roots, versus a dictator in Russia. So that's your choice. Now, I mean, given all the history of Ukraine, similar things happen in Russia. So it's not black and white, it's not that clear. But if I were to make a choice right now, today, it has to be on the side of Ukraine. And that's what I have to say.
Super, thank you. I'm going to be open for another comment. If not, I'll share Sharansky. Anyone else want to jump in? Okay, Sharansky said the following. I'm just going to excerpt. Anti-Semitism is not specific to Ukraine or any land. It's the most ancient hatred. It rises regularly. Secondly, if you like to go to the Alps in Switzerland, remember that the whole Jewish community was burnt alive in order to avoid the plague there. They thought the Jews were starting the plague, so they burned the Jewish community alive in Switzerland. If you enjoy traveling to Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella are big heroes of Spain, and they exiled half of the Jewish people.
England.
Provence, a great place. I love it there. But what the Crusaders did there, terrible massacres of the entire Jewish community. We probably will have to move to another planet. This is Sharansky. We have to move to another, that's what I say. On the basis of what the world did to us, we should move to another planet. So that is a practical suggestion which SpaceX wants to make possible. We'll go to Mars, and we can do that. Secondly, Sharansky says, I'm not a rabbi, yeah, but there was a time when Hagar and Ishmael were sent out into the desert, and Ishmael almost dies from thirst. God says to Hagar, this is the quote, "Don't be afraid. I'll help your son as he is." And then the angels in heaven revolt against God. Don't you know what the followers of Ishmael are going to do to our people? God responds in this midrash, now, at this moment, is this child innocent or guilty? And the angels have to say innocent. And in the midrash, God then finishes up, I will judge every person as they are in their time, and I will not deal with people beyond this. Okay, so he says half of the Ukrainian government is Jewish, and Zelensky speaks about Jewish, and above and beyond all this, this is how Sharansky concludes. It so happened that God, providence, history, has put Ukraine in the unique position of being defenders of the free world at this time. So let's judge Ukraine at this time and support them. Okay, I just thought that that was, from Sharansky, interesting. Steve, welcome back from jury duty.
I'm actually on jury duty. I'm in the jury room on a lunch break. We're in selection. I'm hoping I'll be done today, but that remains to be seen.
Okay,
I want to, reaffirm that final comment. I think in terms of anything, and it can be even an individual who reforms, and you have to treat people based on right now, whatever their great grandparents did, or the country, or, the sober alcoholic. What are they doing today? How are they helping people in the world? And you have to approach both at the individual level, I think, and the greater level, and look at what are today's circumstances.
yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, all of you, for multiple brief, focused answers. I thought that Sharansky put it out there the way you did. And so that's fine. Now, as long as we're, dealing with a variety of issues, BBC News presenter Anjana Kedgil interviewed former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett about the events in the Jenin refugee camp and the 3-day assault by Israeli troops on the terrorist base, which is substantially all that Jenin is about. It is a terrorist base. The BBC News presenter said the following, quote, Israeli forces are happy to kill children. That's a direct quote from the BBC News presenter. The report says Bennett was stunned. He couldn't believe that an anchor with Britain's national broadcaster was regurgitating an anti-Semitic blood libel dating back to the Middle Ages on live television. So that happened last week in the UK. The broadcaster said it. Bennett tweeted, the conversation was one of the most hostile interviews toward Israel that I can remember. And the BBC has now stated that the network apologizes for the broadcaster's, the interviewer's statement. So I feel much better now that they've issued an apology, and that you're supposed to then forget that on the BBC, it stated the Israeli forces are happy to kill children. Okay. I see Jay Weinschenker joined the conversation. And Jay, I don't know you, but if you could at least say hello, we could welcome you.
Hello. I don't know why I can't see my picture, but I thought I had the video on.
Okay, but it's great to have you join us. It's great. Thank you. Oh, there's Jay. Okay, very, very, very good. Eric Weiss? I can't hear you, Eric. You're muted.
Okay. The
Okay.
left-wing media is pervasive all over the world. They don't have the objectivity like certain conservative publications. You know what I'm talking about?
I am so much not going to go there. Eric, let me at least say with respect that objectivity is not a frequent dweller either to the far left or to the far right. Okay?
Yep. Uncle Thomas Sowell says you got to be objective the best you can for accuracy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wow. Okay, very much. So while we're proceeding, there's just a bunch of stuff that happened this week. So then now we took care of BBC. President Joe Biden, that he's president of the United States, right? I know that there are a bunch of American citizens, maybe 30 million, who don't believe he's president, but he is president. Now, he said about the Israeli government, this is one of the most extreme cabinets I've ever seen, and I go back to Golda Meir.
No.
Biden's comment came in response to a question why he has not yet invited Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House. And the president has already said he would not invite Netanyahu in the context of what's going on in trying to change Israeli law, the courts, and so forth. I'd like to pause and throw it open for comment. Biden's comment, Netanyahu will not be invited under current circumstances to the White House. Okay, I see one so far, Steve.
I'm probably an outlier on this, but I think we should engage every country no matter what. It can be China, it could be North Korea. We share a planet, and all have, these countries have the ability to destroy the planet. And no matter how bad the relation or how poorly you view the other country, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to work with them, start somewhere. I'm not saying validate bad practice, but through diplomacy, maybe gradually you improve it. I mean, it's just a larger version of the Republicans and Democrats right now in many areas. And you got to break through the logjam, and you have to work with people, even if at times it seems like you're beating your head against the wall.
Thank you, Michael.
Counterpoint to that, Biden didn't say that he wouldn't engage with the Israeli government. He said he wouldn't host Netanyahu in DC. Is that correct? Yeah. I think absolutely engagement and diplomacy should be happening and must be happening. But on the other hand, when you welcome someone as a state guest, that's a mark of honor and respect, and it shows that you feel things are normal, and they aren't. And it's not a normal government in Israel. And
Super.
I think it's
Thank
perfectly
you. Thank
appropriate
you.
to reflect that.
We're doing great with the responses. David Traynor.
According to Thomas Friedman in the New York Times today, Biden is welcoming President Herzog of Israel to the White House next week. So he's actually attempting to discreetly exercise political influence while maintaining good, strong connections with Israel.
By the way, thank you for that. By the way, the Thomas Friedman column was one of the most head-on direct assaults on the nature of Israeli political life today that I have ever read. Friedman wrote a blistering attack on the Israeli government, Bibi's ministers, blistering attack. I actually couldn't believe that all limits and chains are off. And he said exactly what he meant. Any other comments about Biden inviting Bibi? Rebecca.
I think I read in the LA Times this morning that Biden is actually currently being lauded for his diplomacy in the political events that are happening right now in Lithuania, and that he was able to convince Erdogan to let Sweden join NATO. And my point is that I think Biden has a plan for everything, and timing is his thing. I don't think it's good timing yet for him to invite anybody from Israel.
Now, he's inviting from Israel, as was pointed out, but he's invited President Herzog, not the prime minister. So he is inviting from Israel. That needs
I think that's a diplomatic move.
Okay, Herb.
I agree with President Biden. I think he's doing the correct thing, because inviting him to the White House with the dinners and all that sort of thing implies to many people and to me that he supports Netanyahu, and therefore supports his efforts to do away with the powers of the judiciary.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see. Oh, Jay, there we go. Okay.
Well, I want to disagree with Michael, who said that we should, by inviting Israel, means that we agree with what Israel is doing. No, it just means that we're having a conversation with Israel. You don't, you invite people to your house, you don't agree with every one of them. It means that you're sitting down at your house talking, that's all. And to think that Biden has an agenda, Biden has no clue what he's doing, I don't think. Israel is the only democratic country in the Middle East. If we don't sit down with them, believe me, somebody else will. We have no choice but invite Bibi, especially, to the White House.
I really thank you for the counterpoint, Jay. Really important. Any other comments on this topic of invitations to Bibi, or the lack of same, to the White House? Okay, Sukasa, last comment.
I think that by not inviting Bibi, Biden is being obvious that and inviting Herzog, he's taking a political position without being political. And, it is not going to impact our relations with Israel. But, it's like, if you don't support, you look at Saudi Arabia with the assassination of Khashoggi, you got to somehow, you're doomed if you do, and you're doomed if you don't. But I think Biden is trying to find a middle road by saying, I will welcome the president of Israel, which happens to be a non-political position, but I can't invite Bibi because I don't support his position. And look at what's going on in Israel. This is not a little thing. They're rioting in the streets, they're calling strikes. And this is, I think, Biden's way of saying, I don't support your judicial reform, but I support Israel.
I'm going to throw something out here, and to me, it's a real concern. Israelis do not consider themselves in general the 51st state. They don't consider themselves part of the United States. And there are many Israelis to the right and to the left who resent American efforts to strongly intervene in domestic issues. One of the things that you can absolutely be certain about is that the lack of an invitation to Bibi is fueling the antipathy of many Israeli politicians toward the United States. Agree or disagree, because by not inviting and having it be public, Biden is saying what the Knesset is considering under democratic, and I'm putting in air quotes, democratic process is something which the United States wants to block. So while I have my own feelings about the invitation, do not believe that the lack of invitation is not having a negative impact on the relationship of many Israeli politicians toward the United States. They don't like to be treated like
Vassals.
colonies.
Vassals.
Okay, I just needed to come in like that. Jay, you had your hand up, and then Howard.
I'm sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. I was laughing at somebody else's comment.
Okay, Howard?
Oh,
Should I go ahead? No?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry, Howard.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that I think it's being objective to say that this is not coming out of thin air, and that the United States policy, if you go, this is not inviting Bibi, is a continuation of things that have been going on in Democratic administrations for a long time. If you go back to Carter, who planted the seed of the idea that Israel is an apartheid state, Obama, who made a point of snubbing Netanyahu long before there was any judicial reform, or Ben Gvir. So I think it's just giving them an excuse to vent their anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli, anti-Netanyahu anger. And that I would just ask, is there any other country that's supposed to be our friend where we explicitly say that the head of their state is persona non grata in the White House?
As to the last point, I couldn't come up with a name of the head of state of a friendly country who is otherwise regarded as persona non grata. Okay, I can't come up with another name. And Howard, I would just ask, you slid past.
Oh, Bush, George W. Bush also.
No,
I mean, George H.W.
anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, anti-Bibi, and it sounded like you made them one. And
just
I would have to really object to that.
Well, that's just demagoguery. You can ignore that.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
Okay, I just have a spreadsheet that suddenly popped up on my screen. Okay, we're going to stop with that, but it is not a simple, we don't like BB, we don't like what he's doing so good that Joe Biden is slapping him around, but there are consequences. And we just need to be aware, okay? Next, just to veer off from serious topics into miserable topics. How do I say this? I wish I could say don't record. How do I say this? In Israel today, there is an increase on the part of ultra-Orthodox extremists to spit on churches in Jerusalem and in the old city, most specifically on Armenian priests who come with very visible garb. They are clearly identified. Somebody has speaking that I would love to have disappear. The young Haredim in the alleys of the old city have become accustomed to spit on Gentiles. And I just have to leave you with that. There is no upside, downside, or change. By the way, Risa and I know full well, this is not the first time. This is not new, but it is surging now. And the Armenian clergy in the old city are looking for protection. And that's pretty sad. Okay. I don't know. I have such a great list of things to talk with you about. I'm still digging for more good news. Let's go back. The Anglican Church in Canada has removed the call for converting the Jews. Okay, can we just focus on that? And 2.5 million from the House Appropriations Committee being recommended to fight anti-Semitism. I want to balance today because it's not balanced. Do you remember who the B'nai Menashe community is? Anybody here know who the B'nai Menashe? Howard?
I think it was like the Cochin Jews or somebody from India.
The Indian Jews.
Are an Indian
Jews.
Rita?
The Indian Jews.
Chinese.
I'm sorry?
Chinese.
They're a Jewish community on the north, on that side, is that west? Northwestern corner of India, where it borders China. And there is a group of Jews living there who consider themselves to be descendants of the tribe of Manasseh, driven out of the land during the period after the destruction of the temple, first temple. There are 5,000 B'nai Menashe Jews who claim to be part of the.
It's Miriam's. Miriam, you need to mute.
Why?
You're causing an echo.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So the 5,000 B'nai Menashe Jews claim descent from a long-lost tribe living on the border with Myanmar and India, China, and a whole bunch have already started to make Aliyah. And without going into it, Risa and I met a group of them in India. And I have to tell you, boy, do our attitudes about what a Jew looks like change, okay? They do not look Eastern European, okay? And they are making a conscious effort to return to the Jewish people. The bad news is nothing connected with what they're doing. In that area of the world, civil war has broken out. Civil war, and I can tell you it's between the Mai Tai and Kuki tribes, in case you're interested. Hundreds have died, tens of thousands are displaced. And most of the B'nai Menashe live in the KUKI Kuki zone. Two of the B'nai Menashe synagogues have been burnt down. They are ransacking Jewish homes. They're vandalizing them. And welcome B'nai Menashe to the Jewish world. It is awful. And what can be done to help them? It's a civil war in an area in which B'nai Menashe are centered. And we just have to be aware they're being targeted. They're being targeted because they're Jews, which makes me very angry. These people are trying to find their way back into the 21st century and to become part of the Jewish world. And then this. Okay, Sukasa.
It sounds similar to the Ethiopian Jewish situation when Israel did an airlift. Do you know if that's being considered?
I will have to tell you that from what we're being able to get in terms of news reports, what's happening now against the B'nai Menashe, actually physically more dangerous. Okay, but of course I understand what you're saying. Of course. Okay. We're going to move on. I want you to come back in 2 weeks. I don't want you to be sad. I promise I will have good news in the Jewish world. I promise. I promise to try. Here's good news. A family name that had been placed because of donations on art museums, colleges, a wing of Shakespeare's Globe Theater, a medical school in Tel Aviv. The Sackler name has now been removed from all of that. The Sacklers, as you know, played a very serious role in the current opioid crisis, OxyContin. They have promised to spend $6 billion on addiction treatment and prevention. And in exchange for the $6 billion, they have been granted immunity from civil claims against themselves, the Sackler family. So $6 billion in fines, and now there no longer is a Sackler medical school in Tel Aviv. There is no longer a Sackler wing in the Shakespeare Globe Theater. There is no more a lot of stuff. The language came this way from the Tel Aviv University. The university has announced that the family, quote, has kindly agreed to remove their name, close quote, from the medical school. I don't know if we need to make any comment, but I'm open to that. Jay?
Oh, there's a couple of things. They're going to give restitution or $6 billion towards rehabbing people, and yet they've made $600 billion probably. So it's a pretty good deal for the Sacklers, no matter how you look at it. I wanted to go back to what you said about the Haredi spitting on the church people. Number one, it's disgusting, and it certainly doesn't represent me or any of us as a Jew. But instead of talking about them spitting on, there's a couple of isolated cases maybe, you should talk about how Muslims treat Jews in general by blowing themselves up in a crowded bus or a coffee shop. That's a little more detrimental. Sorry to come off so strong, but
Yesterday I had a beautiful day. Today isn't working out so well, but yesterday I had a beautiful day. I have been teaching part of the conversion program at Wilshire. And I have to tell you, it's a big program. And I totally love the experience. I just totally love the experience. This past Saturday evening, I was invited by one of the people who were students in that class to officiate at a marriage for them. Right? I mean, can we say this is great news? This is wonderful news. This is good stuff. It is good stuff. It's happy. Yesterday, I officiated with two others as part of the Beit Din. Eventually, 6 people became Jews yesterday through the Wilshire program. Okay? So I'm trying to figure out how some of this material reads to people who have just joined the Jewish people. I could just tell you yesterday, there were tears, there was joy, there were hugs. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. We even had one young man whose father is Jewish, whose mother is not, decide that he wanted to make full affirmation of an authentic Jewish identity. He wanted to convert, even though according to Reform standards, there was no requirement for him to convert in order to be part of the Jewish people. And I was there with this guy. I walked him into the mikveh. Eventually we brought him out. You know, walked him into the mikveh. And he walked out from that experience crying, so pleased that he has removed any sort of barrier to his being accepted into the Jewish people. And then I wish I could say that everything there is to be said about how Jews carry out our ethical mandates are terrific. We have a lot to work on. So if you're into tikkun olam or social justice or doing things to educate Jews to act morally and ethically, I think that's a good thing. I'm going to stop there before I jump onto my next tasty subject. I have a tasty subject. Any comment? How many of you like donuts? I like donuts.
Are you bringing some to the next meeting?
No. No, I would if we were in person, but you know it's difficult. Okay. Now, a local bake shop in West Orange, New Jersey, received a request for rainbow frosted cupcakes from a repeat customer. The owner of the West Orange Bake Shop, that's the name of it, is an Orthodox Jew. He thought about the request to make rainbow frosted cupcakes. And let's face it, this was intentionally pride-themed goodies. The owner, a gentleman named Mattel, said that such rainbow frosted cupcakes are symbols of a celebration of something which is against Torah. I cannot make this. And so the order was refused. Now, you're dealing with New Jersey, okay? And whatever else we might want to say about New Jersey, and I have a lot to say about New Jersey, whatever else you say about New Jersey, there are other bake shops, Jewish kosher bake shops, that they can get and did get the rainbow colored cupcakes from. I just dangled the preposition. But what do you think about the owner of the shop refusing the order on the basis of Jewish law? And then I will get to something else. Michael?
I wonder what the owner would have said if a woman had walked in, or a guy, in the month of June and said, I need rainbow frosted donuts for my child's birthday. He's a big fan of the Noah's Ark story. And whether the shop owner would have had the same objection. It's discrimination. It's outright discrimination. I do not know if New Jersey has the same laws on the books that Colorado did until the Supreme Court shot it down, making LGBT people a protected class that you cannot discriminate against at will in the operation of a public service, such as a bake shop open to the public. But I guess that they do. And again, if not for the Supreme Court and 303 Creative, the customers should have been protected, and it's disgraceful that they weren't.
Thank you. I see Steve. Okay.
To me, this is the typical right view of religious freedom. It turns the First Amendment on its head. It's actually establishment. You're allowing one person to impose his religious beliefs on another, and that is just wrong. Making these cupcakes does not interfere with the shop owner's practice of his Judaism in any way, shape, or form. It's just nasty, and I have a very hard time with it. And how would he feel if he went into a restaurant with his yarmulke and they said, we don't allow hats of any type in our restaurant, you can leave? He probably would not appreciate that, and this is no different.
Thank you for that. Merle. Oh, I thought I saw your hand up, but it's not.
My hand's not up, but I agree with
The
what
orange
Steve.
thing behind your head.
That's the world back there. I agree with what Steve said. I think that I don't think that our government as a whole in any way should be allowing people to discriminate, saying it's okay to discriminate in their businesses. And this isn't the first time. It's happened in many places. And it's disturbing.
I see Jay, and then we're gonna, we're moving, unfortunately. Got 10 topics, 4 minutes left. Yes.
I see two sides of it. Number one, it's a terrible business decision. Number two, it's the wrong thing to do. But the government shouldn't be telling people what they can or can't do in their business that they open. I think the best way is to shut them down by boycotting their business and making an example of them. Maybe the next time somebody wants a rainbow cake, they'll get it, because they saw what happened here.
I think that what I need to do here is just reference what's already been referenced, the U.S. Supreme Court decision, which ruled last week that a Colorado web designer had the right to refuse to build a wedding website for same-sex couple. The Supreme Court ruled that the web designer had the right to refuse. What was interesting about this, and I don't understand the law, whatever, this was a hypothetical. It wasn't that the request actually had been made, but the plaintiff said, what if? And the Supreme Court, with its hidden agenda, took it and said, oh, what if? Clearly, you have a right to refuse.
No, actually, it's worse. They did not say what if. They set forth a number of facts which in fact were not true. They were entirely fabricated, which is very different. And there is a procedure to fix it. I doubt the Supreme Court will do anything, and the decision's wrong on the merits as well.
Yep, yep. Okay, Michael, then we're going to move on from cupcakes. Though that I haven't had lunch yet, and talking about cupcakes has made me anxious to bring this conversation to an end. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the notion that shop owners should be able to do as they please and serve people as they please. There's actually no end to this. The only difference between the LGBT community and any other community is that LGBT people are not a protected class under federal law. They're only protected by certain states, whereas African Americans, Jews, Muslims, so forth are protected by federal law, and the Supreme Court has not yet overturned that, although they're clearly hostile to the idea of states protecting LGBT people. But in theory, there's no difference that I can see between being.
Says they are protected. There's
I'm sorry?
Supreme Court. Gorsuch has held that they are protected under federal law. It's in a Supreme Court opinion. And you can't, in the context of discrimination, you can't say LGBTQ plus RN whatever, because each of them has a different meaning, which plays differently into how you would interpret gender or sex.
Okay, my overall, I'm sorry, protected as far as public accommodations go is what I was referring to specifically. But in any event, I'm saying that there isn't anything so different about the right that the Supreme Court is currently establishing for a shop owner to be able to refuse compelled speech from the example of a printer refusing to print invitations to a bar bat mitzvah because they believe that Jews are sinful, or being able to refuse to print invitations to a marriage between people of different races. It is exactly the same principle at stake. And so either we're a country where shop owners can openly discriminate, or we're a country where they don't. Personally, I want to live in the second one, but that's just me.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it is, Michael, it's now a live issue. How that happened, I'm at a loss, but the Supreme Court has made it a live issue, and we're going to have to be dealing with the ramifications of that down the line. Every question that you and others have asked, they're going to be raised before the Supreme Court. What about this? What about this? I'm a private shop owner. Can't I do this? And it's going to be a mess. I want to end, it's those cupcakes. I want to end by mentioning a British city, Norwich. I'm sure it's pronounced Norwich, but it has a W, and I prefer to use the W because that's why it's there. In 1144, a blood libel occurred in Norwich. The first known case of blood libel in history, where Jews were accused of killing a Christian child and using the blood for the baking of matzah. It spurred massacres and pogroms across Europe. There was an 1190 massacre in Norwich, and there have been many more as well. Why do I mention it? We'll end with the good news. The mayor of Norwich today apologized for the historic assault on local Jews, and they're handing the oldest non-church building in Norwich, a 12th century building, to the Jewish community to build a Jewish heritage center. Okay? I mean, I like that. That's good. And in case I forgot to mention it, the House Appropriations Committee has allocated $2.5 million to fight anti-Semitism. And I so much enjoy being with you, and I do struggle for balance. And we're going to find out about Israel in the next couple of days. The explosions are happening everywhere. Harv, what did you say? My father served in the U.S. Army.
At
At
Norwich.
Norwich.
It was a big air base. It's right across from Germany, basically. And that's where he was at D-Day.
Huh.
So, yeah,
Wow.
that's part of the history now.
So the world is infinitely small. Though I didn't hear Brad Ellison, I know he's there. To all of you, Patricia Margulies, all of you who are there, this was terrific. Thank you, Jay. Thanks for joining us. Invite more people. Our numbers are growing, which is pretty satisfying. Invite people to be with us in 2 weeks, because by that time, maybe the whole world will blow itself up. Okay.
Oh,
Good seeing everybody.
thank you. This was wonderful as always.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you.